Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. So I hope you enjoyed those last two episodes I threw in the mix to kick off the new year with a little bit of motivation and inspiration. And if you haven't listened to those two last episodes, especially that one on making excuses, I hope you go back and check that out. But today, get back on track with my 30-part series based on my book, Who's Buying You? Until You Sell Yourself, You Won't Sell Much. So today we're on chapter 11 from that 30-chapter book, and I'll be talking to you about emotions rule. But before I get to that, I just want to remind you, we've got a new YouTube channel. So you go to youtube.com/the Blue Collar Leadership. Hope you go check that out, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll actually, if you do that, you'll actually know when these episodes come out, because you can listen to them there as audio just like you do here. But we're also going to be adding a lot of videos and that sort of thing, different length videos, and going to do some live videos. I know they're going to be live on LinkedIn and maybe live on YouTube as well. Ria's handling that. She's the expert in that area. I'll just be doing some talking. All right. So make sure you check that out. So let's get into today's lesson on selling. Because when it comes to selling, emotions rule. The subtitle of this chapter is Actions Are Based on Emotions. And as I've told you throughout this series, what I'm teaching you about selling, these principles, they apply to everybody everywhere. But I'm trying to wrap them in the context of selling. And sometimes I'll just generalize it a bit to make sure maybe you're not a professional salesperson, but you can see how it applies to you in your life. And you probably can already see that because you make choices and take actions based on your emotions, whether you're a professional salesperson or not. So I want to lead off today with a quote that's in the book from Dale Carnegie. He says, when dealing with people, you are not dealing with creatures of logic. You are dealing with creatures of emotion. One more time without me messing it up. When dealing with people, you are not dealing with creatures of logic. You are dealing with creatures of emotion. So I'm sure you're fully aware of the impact emotions have on the buyer's decision to buy the product or service. And you should, because whether you're a professional salesperson or not, I guarantee you're buying stuff. And you know how emotions impact your decisions as a buyer of products and services. But I want you to consider the impact emotions have on determining if the buyer will buy into you. That's what this whole book is about. This book ain't about them buying your product or service. That you got to deal with that later. First thing you got to do, they got to buy in to you. They got to buy you. They got to know, who are you? John C. Maxwell says this. He said he was on the mark when he said this. He said, people are more willing to take action when you first move them with emotion. This is absolutely true when it comes to selling yourself. That's one reason Ria and I speak all over the country. I mean, we've been in as many as 40 states in a single year in Canada speaking. And we were super busy that year. And we went to a lot of states more than once, multiple times. But when we speak, we want to move people with emotion because it allows us to connect to them with positive emotions. So we tell a lot of stories. That's one reason we do that. Because stories stir up emotions. Because when we tell a story, the other person can tell themselves a story about our story. We don't even know what that story is. We don't hear it, but they do, as they think it to themselves because of the story they're hearing. But you can be very creative with the stories you tell. You can tell a story to make somebody sad. You can tell somebody a story to make them mad. You can tell them a story to make them happy. But emotions rule. Don't forget that. The buyer won't always remember what you say or what you do as a salesperson, but they'll always remember how you make them feel as a human being, as a person. You can be sure these feelings, good or bad, will be passed on to others through word of mouth. So if you're selling, how you make somebody feel, well, they're going to talk about you. You make them feel good, they're going to say good stuff about you. You make them feel bad, they ain't going to say such good stuff about you. You make them feel really good, they're going to talk to the world about you on social media. You make them feel really bad, they're probably going to talk to the world bad about you on social media. How you make people feel is going to have a lot to do with the word of mouth you get as you establish your track record as a sales professional. But again, this applies in any area of life with any people. How you make people feel is going to determine what they say about you. It may determine if you get promoted at work or if you get fired at work. It's a lot of ways to look at this. But when we're talking about sales, if you're very good or very bad, there's a good chance their feelings will lead them to share their experience the way they saw it, not the way you saw it, but the way they saw it with their friends in real life and their friends through social media. They may have a YouTube channel you don't know nothing about. They may have a podcast you don't know anything about. And not everybody's got high character, so they may tell the world all about you, your name, your business, your product. You don't know. What I do know is how you make them feel will determine if that word of mouth is positive or negative. But again, that applies in all areas of life. You want to get ahead in life? Try to make the most people feel the best. You want to be mediocre? Don't worry about how you make people feel. You want to struggle through life? Make everybody feel bad. Whether we choose to use the word feelings or the word emotions, we're talking about the exact same thing. Our thoughts determine our feelings. And the buyer will never believe what you tell them. They will only believe the story they tell themselves about what they heard you say. Think about that. That's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about Rhea and I when we speak all over the country and we're talking about leadership and personal growth and all that type of stuff. The folks in the audience, I tell them this sometimes literally from the stage when we're speaking. I tell them they're never going to believe a word we say. They're only going to believe what they tell themselves about what we say. It also applies to you if you're in professional sales. Don't believe me? Odds are you just finished doing it and may even still be doing it at this very moment. You may even stop right now and do it again just to be sure. It's a human condition. It's what we do. And it's how we're wired. When we hear something, we tell ourselves a story. We agree or we disagree. Sometimes it's instantly. Sometimes we got to think about it. Sometimes we got to do research on it. Sometimes we got to talk to some other people. But when you hear my words on this podcast, you most likely pause and think about them. You may literally hit the pause button and think about it. When you do that, you're telling yourself a story. You're trying to figure out if you agree or disagree. You're thinking about it deeper. When I was telling you about you telling yourself that story, and you were probably doing it a moment ago. When you listen to those words, you may have even hit rewind and listened to them again. And you may have even asked yourself, is what Mac just said true? Then you told yourself a story of agreement or a story of disagreement. But either way, your belief in my words was based on your thoughts, not my words. Kind of tricky, ain't it? It's a good thing if you learn this and you realize everything you do and say, people are telling themselves a story about you. That's why we need to align our behaviors and our words and our action, everything, with high character traits. Everything I talk about on this podcast, everything Rhea talks about on her podcast. But your emotions were also generated by your thoughts, not my words. Think about that. That gets pretty deep. Again, it gets deep with you on a personal level too. This is what's happening between people, all people. But we're talking about in this book, this context, about buyers and sellers. But it's happening at home with your spouse or your children or your significant other. But our emotions are generated by our thoughts, not what somebody says. That's why two people can be standing in the same place, hear the exact same thing. One of them gets mad, the other one don't even act like they heard it. Or they could even get happy. Right? You could be at work somewhere, somebody gets fired. Somebody sees and witnesses somebody get fired. The person getting fired hears the words, "You're fired." They could get angry. They could get mad. They could get sad. Somebody else sitting in the room could hear that conversation and they could get happy and glad because they're glad that person got fired. But it ain't the words that cause the emotions in anyone. It's the thoughts that someone hears or the thoughts that someone tells themselves, they think to themselves after they hear some words. The words are just another way to influence someone. But you don't determine someone's thoughts with your words. You just influence them. We choose our thoughts. We can choose to be angry when someone says something. We can choose to ignore it, or we can choose whatever emotions we want if we learn how to control ourselves. And if you want to dive deep into a book that'll help you with all that stuff, check out Rhea's book, The Ladder of Influence, 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond. That right there, folks, is a really, really, really good book. So you need to check that out. If you're into the stuff I'm talking about, make sure you go check out her book. But as I'm talking about this, about you telling yourself a story, and you don't necessarily agree with my words. Sometimes you do it so fast you don't really realize you're doing it because you're just agreeing. You're just floating right along. But you'll know when you disagree because you're going to pause. You'll forget what else is being said. If you let the audio keep playing, you'll have to stop it and rewind it because you'll be in your own thought trying to figure out if you agree or disagree. But think back on the lesson already that I've already told you. You've been doing this since you started listening. You've been doing it to every podcast episode of mine that you listen to, or anyone else's. But think about this. Your potential buyers will begin telling themselves stories about you the moment they hear the word of mouth about you from someone else, or the moment they meet you. You may have not even said anything. Someone just sees you and starts telling themselves a story. It could be because you're late. You may look fine. You may look professional, but you're late, so they're going to tell themselves a story. Or you may be coming in with a box of chocolates. They ain't never met you. You looking professional, but you got some candy. They're going to tell themselves a different story than if you were late. Or you could come in not dressed professionally. All kind of things. Or you may have everything right, and you may have that box of chocolate or that box of donuts or some biscuits if you're there early for a breakfast meeting. But if someone else has already been talking about you, giving you negative word of mouth advertisement or positive, those people that you go in to meet, they will have already been telling themselves stories about you. If it was negative stories, they think you brought the goodies to try to manipulate them. If it's positive stories, they connect the dots and say, I ain't surprised. You got to remember, if you're in professional sales, everybody's talking about you. That's why you may meet some people and you feel like they don't trust you and you just met them. Well, they might have heard something about you, or they might have read something about you. Their truth lies in their head and will be based on the emotions their story generates. That's why this whole book is to help you generate as much positive word of mouth advertisement for who you are as a person, because that's going to help you sell the product and service. You got to get past the relationship with the people first. And it's a whole lot easier if you got positive word of mouth advertisement when you show up than if you got negative. The story the buyer generates will be based upon their values, their beliefs, and their experiences in the world. And you may not know anything about them. So you may have the greatest intention in the world, but you may be crossing their values and you don't even know it. And then you make a withdrawal into their trust account. What you got to know is, though, we see the world as we are, not as it is. That's why multiple people can see or witness the same thing and tell themselves completely different stories and have a completely different set of emotions and take completely different actions. Leadership is influence. You got to understand that. Everything that I talk about. That's why if you're in professional sales, all of our leadership books will help you build trust more effectively, intentionally, help you understand other people. But we see the world as we are, not as it is. And this principle explains what I was just saying. Why multiple people have the same experience but experience it differently. It's because they tell themselves completely different stories that generate completely different emotions. So this insight should provoke a much better and deeper understanding of what's meant by perception is reality. You've heard that. I'm sure you've heard that. It's just a popular saying that a lot of people say it, but they don't really understand it. But it's the truth. You don't get to decide what someone else perceives. They do. You can try to influence it, but you don't determine it. I can't tell you what to think about me. I can try to influence it, but you get to decide. And a person's perception may or may not be accurate. If your perception is in alignment with the true reality, then it's true. If your perception is not in alignment with the true reality, then it's false. But a more accurate statement than perception is reality would be your perception determines your reality. Because just generally saying perception is reality, well, somebody's perception may not be reality. But their perception determines their reality. Because it's truly, really how they're seeing it. It is their reality because of the thoughts they're having, the emotions they're feeling. They're having that reality. It's real for them. So your emotion influences your choices. And in my book, Defining Influence, Increasing Your Influence Increases Your Options, I dedicated 6 pages to the choice formula. The choice formula is this right here. thoughts plus emotions plus action equals choice. So you're going to have some thoughts, you're going to have some feelings, you're going to act based on those feelings. Once you act, you've made a choice. Until you act, you maybe have decided to do something, but you haven't done anything. You haven't made that choice. When you make a choice, you've done something. You've carried out some kind of action that was based on some previous thoughts and emotions. And it can all happen instantaneously. Or you may have some thoughts lead you to some emotions, and finally you take some action. It might be days or weeks. But that choice formula, thoughts plus emotions plus action equals choice. So as you can see, thought is the foundation for your choice. You already know you act on what you perceive to be reality. You know that. Everybody knows that. When you fully understand your thoughts lead to your feelings and your feelings lead to your actions, you'll become much more intentional and try to influence the buyer to have more positive thoughts. That's a good thing. People who are buying from a salesperson, they'd rather feel good about it instead of bad about it. So how you choose to influence a buyer will be based on your character. That's why not just everyone in general, but you as a professional salesperson, if that's what you do, you want to develop your character, because who you are is going to determine how you influence, when you influence, why you influence, if you influence. Some salespeople never going to get to influence the buyer because somebody else is going to influence them not to buy because of how they felt. But you can choose to influence people only for your benefit, which is manipulation. There's a lot of salespeople like that. Those are the salespeople that give sales a bad name. But not everybody's like that, but there certainly are a lot of them. You've probably dealt with some in your life. If you're in professional sales, hopefully you're not one of them. If you're listening to this podcast, odds are you are not one of them. But we don't have to be sick to get better. So it doesn't matter who you are or how you are, you can get better just like I can get better. So you can choose to influence them for only your benefit, again, which is manipulation, or you can choose to influence them for mutual benefit, which is motivation. So motivation means we both benefit. If I'm trying to sell you something, I'm going to benefit and you're going to benefit. If I'm trying to manipulate you, I'm going to benefit. You may or may not benefit. I don't care. See the difference, how that feels? So if you choose manipulation as your motive, the buyer's going to tell themselves a negative story and generate negative feelings about you. You can validate that. Do you want anybody manipulating you? If someone's trying to manipulate you, you going to tell yourself a positive story? No, you're going to tell yourself a negative story. And that story going to generate some negative emotions within you. But you as a professional salesperson, and actually anybody in any job, you're more likely to be fired and receive negative word of mouth from other people if your motive is manipulation. That's why needy and greedy salespeople are needy and greedy. They number one, they needy because they're greedy. Because that greed comes through as manipulation. And then they're needy because people don't like that manipulation. So they don't do very well in sales. So if you choose motivation as your motive, the buyers will tell themselves a positive story which is going to generate positive feelings about you. And you're more likely to be hired by the buyer, which means they're going to buy from you. And you're also much more likely to receive positive word of mouth advertisement about you. So you can get more sales. Those are called referrals, right? When someone gives you positive word of mouth advertisement, they're giving you a referral. When someone gives you negative word of mouth advertisement, it's the exact opposite of a referral. Even if someone doesn't tell someone not to buy from you, that's what's happening when you get negative word of mouth advertisement. Let's talk about the 3 points at the end of each chapter. Seller beware. I call this little area at the end of the book. So I want to read these to you. I'm going to read them, directly from the book. I may go back and talk about it. I may not. Let's go through them. Seller beware. Point number 1. Your intention, motive, agenda, and behavior will stir the emotions that will either make you or break you. Seller beware. Point number 2. Your perception of reality determines the story you will tell and the emotions you will feel. Feelings sell. Seller beware. Point number 3. You can't change someone's perceptions, but who you are will influence the story they tell themselves. Seller beware. If you're selling, you better beware of these points I'm sharing with you at the end of each one of these chapters. So there's 3 of them at the end of each chapter. If you listen to the entire series, this 30-part series, 3 times 30 is 90. So you'll have 90 seller beware points if you're taking notes. Hopefully you're buying the book. Much of what I'm sharing in this particular series is actually from the book. I'm sharing a bunch of points from it, literally. Pretty much everything in the book. But I'm adding a lot in between the lines. But if you want a concise and precise content related to this, I hope you get the book. You can make notes. You can flip to it really quick. You can't flip to it on this podcast and find a specific line or something. A lot of people don't realize that people think I'm just trying to sell you books. I don't care if you buy a book or not. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm going to be okay. But I'm trying to help people actually learn how to learn. Podcasts are great. I've listened to them a lot myself. I still do. I watch a lot of videos. But if I'm interested in something for real, I want a real book. I want to highlight that thing. I want to mark it up. I want to put my notes in it. I might want to put Post-its in it. I want to fold the pages. I want to reference it like a tool. If you're in professional sales, you need this tool. It needs to be in your briefcase or on your passenger seat in your car when you're driving around. You need to think about it. You need to reflect on it. This content needs to be top of mind so that you can generate as much positive word of mouth advertisement as possible. You'll learn it. I did that when I started teaching leadership development. I used to carry around a backpack full of books. Some of them were always in there, and then I was always reading new books. So I was exchanging some of them in and out, but they were some of them were always in there. And I recommend if you're in professional sales, you need to have your little kit. And if you're listening to this podcast and you listen all the way up through this chapter 11, part 11 of 30, maybe you're liking this book. You might want to get it, add it to your sales toolkit. And also, if you're teaching someone else, if you're ever mentoring someone else in sales, trying to help someone else out, you can have a resource that you can pick up. You can flip it open. You can read them a quote or something out of it. You can show them the cover. They can take a picture of it. They can go get it themselves. And it doesn't matter if it's my book or someone else. I'm just saying that's the power of having a real book. There's lots of reasons to have a real book. It ain't to put some money in Mac's pocket. I'm going to be all right. I'm telling you. I'm just trying to help you be more effective. Talk to you next time. Remember this. emotions rule.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.